as the great late mayor of New York, LaGuardia said, there's no Democrat or Republican way of sweeping the street. Um, I mean, you're just laying out some common sense points and ideas, and I guess, and you're a younger mayor in the pantheon of mayors and how we end up assuming office. So I just want to ask you, like, how did that? Where does that come from?
Well, I think you
Just
mentioned it well. It is just common sense. These are not, I'm a policy wonk. Like I was a staffer for my whole career, licensed attorney. I worked at all levels of government. I want things to function. And I also, you mentioned my age and my generation. I am so sick of what I'm seeing nationally and statewide because we are dividing people when there's nothing to be divisive about. I do think 15 to 20% of the country loves the extremism. They're feeding it, and they're the ones running the primary systems and network television and all the things. But 80% of Americans, they want to work together. And I always, when I speak to private sector folks, it's fascinating. I'm like, you don't get to act like that in your line of business. You don't get to tell your neighbor you're not going to talk to them for a year. You know what? We're just not going to pass a budget for 3 years. How's that sound? And I think that I hope that my generation of leadership that is coming into, whether it's business or private sector nonprofit, is fed up enough. They're willing to speak up. The other thing I would tell you, Mayor Nutter, that I have at my disposal, what's beautiful is I don't care. I don't need this job, right? I do not care about the next position. I have no aspiration. I want to live in Fort Worth and raise my family. And if it costs me my job to be common sense, great. But I think it actually will reward our city by keeping us on the right track. And frankly, admitting when conservative policies don't work or when they're right, fighting for them, right? And I do think for the future of the United States, when it comes to public safety, we desperately need to set politics aside. I'll give you a great example. Texas is known for sort of struggling with what our gun laws should be. I'll just put it like that. I don't have to politicize it. And at times you'll have the Chiefs Association speak up against a bill that is perceived as pro-gun owner, right? And I think we just need to pause and ask ourselves, when you have the professionals, again, warning you about what they're seeing in the streets of their cities, let's listen to the professionals as best we can.
By the way, you mentioned, I just want our listeners to know that when it comes to expanding Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, which in Texas Republicans have staunchly resisted, you've been an advocate for that. And you've also come to the defense of transgender children and their families amid the state's push to label some parents of, this is amazing, some parents of transgender youth as child abusers. Again, I think, are those examples of what you're talking about when you talk about your common sense approach?
But furthermore, I'm so fortunate. These are deeply personal issues to me. I was a Medicaid kid in Texas. My mom signed us up for CHIP. And honestly, in this current program in Texas, my family wouldn't have qualified. It's too complicated to get you to that result, but my mom would have no health insurance, right? And we just now went to 12 months postpartum for Medicaid in Texas. That's a win. It's incredibly complicated, but I believe strongly that, as we know, the number one reason for bankruptcy in this country is not for bad financial decisions, it's because of medical debt. And I think we have to grapple with that. And Texas has struggled with that politically. I'll leave that aside. It's personal to me. And on the transgender issue, at the time, Texas was really considering how to penalize parents. My eldest daughter is adopted. We were part of the foster care system that's very messy. It's very bogged down. You have families going through the cracks. And all I could think about was, you're going to create a nightmare by focusing on other families that are already living in a really difficult circumstance with children that are struggling. And then you're also going to compound the problem with our foster care system. So again, it's just common sense. It's not to over politicize. And sometimes that gets taken out of context of what you're pro or against. It's just, no, pause and understand the systems that are already broken and you're going to make them worse.